Year 7. Macbeth, Act 1, Scene 7, and a bit of Scene 6. Last lesson we looked at the word equivocation. Do you remember what it means? I'm sure you'll remember that it means using one word or phrase to have two different meanings. For instance, the gunpowder plotters said that Parliament would suffer a blow. They could have meant a shock. They also could have meant explosion by dynamite. And they also, during their trial, managed to avoid offending God by using equivocation as well. So they technically didn't lie in their defense, therefore thereby saving their souls. And how is Lady Macbeth's use of words equivocal? We must take care of the king when he arrives, she says. How is that equivocation? What could she mean by take care of? Now think to herself. So previously, in a few months ago, I imagine you learned what a rhetorical question is. What is a rhetorical question? You remember? Have a think. Well, it is a question that you use without expecting a response, and you use it to make a statement or a point. For instance, is it cold in here? You might say to somebody who's wearing a coat in hot weather, or you might say, my goodness, is that a time, to somebody from whom you're trying to escape, or if you're running short of time. So those are examples of rhetorical questions. Now, we need to know what deliberation means, because Macbeth does a lot of it in this scene. Is long, careful thought or discussion, and if you can imagine an issue being placed in scales to be weighed up, benefits, disbenefits, benefits, disadvantages, and if you remove them from the scales, it is, as the Latin suggests, you're moving it de libra, or from the scales, after weighing up the issue. So how does, or why does Macbeth need to deliberate about whether to kill the king? Why does he need to weigh up the problem? What does he stand to gain? What could he lose if he commits murder? Pause the video if you need more time. And, well, he could lose reputation, but he could gain status, for one. And just to make sure you've understood what deliberation means, I've given you 3 words here. Which of them is a synonym for deliberation? Is it A, thought? Is it B, touch? Or is it C, mention? If you don't know, rewind the video. Today you are going to understand Act 1, Scene 7. You're going to analyse the persuasive techniques Lady Macbeth uses to spur on his husband, her husband, and you're going to evaluate which character, which of the two is the most powerful. Just to summarise Act 1, Scene 6 briefly, before we go on with Scene 7. We haven't been sent the text to Scene 6, but it's so short, that's probably why. Basically, King Duncan arrives at the castle, compliments Lady Macbeth and what she's done with the place. He admires the air, he admires the view, and she says that he's very welcome, and that this evening everything will be taken care of, using, of course, equivocation. So, on with Act 1, Scene 7. We meet Macbeth at dinner, or in the dining room, and he gives a soliloquy where he talks about murder being something that cannot be trammelled up easily. So it's something that it isn't a problem. It presents problems that you can't solve easily. So if only, he says, one could trammel up a consequence, sweep up the consequences of a murder into a net. But unlike a fisherman who could catch with his surcease success, bring everything to an end, for a murderer with bloody instructions or murderous tasks, problems will come back to haunt us, plague us. He sees his duty as a poisoned chalice, or a cup full of poison, because Duncan is presenting Macbeth with a moral dilemma. Duncan is somebody who's very virtuous. He isn't boastful, despite being great and full of virtues and full of nobility. He bears his faculties in a meek way, so he's humble, doesn't boast. And Macbeth says that he has spurs to encourage his ambition. He presents his ambition using this zoomorphism as a horse. A spur is a way of is a metal tool for encouraging a horse to do what you want it to do. But he says that his ambition could overjump itself. It could end up falling over. So Lady Macbeth joins Macbeth in the second part of the scene, and we're going to analyse how she persuades Macbeth to do as she says. At this stage, I'll give you the two questions to ask yourself. Flash past the keywords and come back to them in a moment. So, the left is the first part of the scene. How is Macbeth feeling during his deliberation? So read the first attachment, just write down a couple of thoughts about how he's feeling. And on the right-hand side, you'll need the slightly longer attachment. What points is Lady Macbeth making with her rhetorical questions? How else does she persuade Macbeth to agree to the murder? Macbeth joins his wife, and she tells him off. Why have you left the private area? The king is still at supper. So why have you left the private area? Why have you left the chamber? Macbeth says that he's feeling too guilty. He can't bring himself to murdering the man who's promoted him recently to Thane of Cawdor, awarding him that gift. Lady Macbeth responds, Hope is drunk. Hope is drunk. Hope is now pale and no longer confident of what you used to be able to do. So your hope is almost shocked at what you once upon a time were capable of. You used to want the crown, the ornament of life, the highest goal. Now you're like a cat from the old adage. This is a fable about a cat that wanted fish but was too afraid to become wet, so therefore wasn't able to achieve. Macbeth says, Prithee, pray thee, or please. And she says, You are no longer capable. You used to dare, now you aren't manly enough. You're a child rather than a man. She makes a lot of jokes or insults. She mocks Macbeth's masculinity by saying he isn't mature enough to take on this task. So she says, Rest assured, I've drugged the gods. I've drugged their wine. I've drugged their cider. They won't remember anything. We'll take their daggers while they sleep. And Macbeth says, Sounds like a plan. Every muscle in my body is geared towards the task. Let's do it, he says by the end. I made a summary for you, in case any of that wasn't clear. Have a quick look, and we'll meet again on the other side.
Students, welcome to the Heath. You'll remember in Act 1, Scene 5, Lady Macbeth planted the idea into her husband's head that they should murder the king. He wasn't too persuaded by that. She's going to persuade him today to be a little more decisive. But meanwhile, Macbeth is being festive with the king at Inverness Castle, where you can see Lady Macbeth on the battlements. She's going to be joined shortly by her husband, but at the moment he's busy entertaining the king. The king's guards, and the Thane of Fife, Macduff. But how does Macbeth feel about the murder? Well, not happy at the moment. He's feeling very anxious.
He knows that the king's been grateful for him, to him. He says that angels will plead trumpet-tongued against the great damnation of Duncan's taking off. So Macbeth knows that committing regicide, killing the king, someone who's been so generous by promoting him, is going to upset that great chain of being. It's going to offend God.
Will not be allowed to aspire.
So, as we leave Macbeth to join his wife for an encouraging talk, we'll put the king and the gods to bed. And arrange Macbeth to join his wife. We'll take out some notes, and Lady Macbeth begins persuasive speech. We will proceed no further in this business. He hath honoured me of late, and I have bought golden pinions from all sorts of people, which would be worn now in their newest gloss, not cast aside so soon.
Was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? Hath it slept since, and waits it now to look so green and pale at what it did so freely? From this time, such I account thy love. Art thou feared to be the same in thine own act and valour as thou art in desire? Wouldst thou have that which thou esteem'st the ornament of life, and live a coward in thine own esteem, letting I dare not wait upon I would, like the poor cat of the adage?
If we should fail?
We fail? But screw your courage to the sticking place, and we'll not fail. When Duncan is asleep, whereto the rather shall his day's hard journey soundly invite him, his two chamberlains will I with wine and wassail so convince that memory, the warder of the brain, shall be a fume, and the receipt of reason a limbeck only. When in swinish sleep their drench'd natures lie as in death, what cannot you and I perform upon the unguarded Duncan? What not put upon his spongy officers, who shall bear the guilt of our great quell?
I'm settled, and bend up each corporal agent to this terrible feat. Away, and mock the time with fairest show. False face must hide what the false heart doth know.
Okay, thank you for reading these two long attachments, Year 7. Your two questions are, how is Macbeth feeling, and what points is Lady Macbeth making rhetorical questions? And how else does she persuade Macbeth to agree to the murder? So, we will speak to you on Wednesday with your independent work tasks this week. Bye for now.